Hello and welcome to a Conquest, the Last Argument of Kings battle report. In this game we're playing city-states versus spires, and the scenario is melee. Now a quick note, those aren't my hoplites there on the screen. I don't actually own a city-states army. I would be proxying them with Old Dominion for this battle report. But I needed something for the thumbnail, and so I reached out to a good friend of mine and he obliged. These are his, and you can find all of his stuff at TWB_paints on Instagram, and it is very, very nice. In addition to city-states, he has a bunch of Infinity and other miniatures. I strongly encourage you to go and check it out. Now, on with the game. So here's the table for this and scenario setup just before turn 1. In this scenario setup, we're once again using 2D terrain. I'm playing at Dan's Place. Battlefield in a box is what we have. I will be publishing some reports, hopefully with 3D terrain at some point in future. But for this case, what I've done is I've decided to quite deliberately ignore the usual Parabellum tournament pack and scenario pack terrain restrictions. So there is terrain here that it's just bigger. It's just bigger and denser than you would see with a strictly tournament legal or scenario legal pack. So what we've got here are we have some we have some light forests. So these are obscuring. That's about 11 or 12 inches from side to side, so it's much larger than you're legally allowed. This one as well is obscuring. We have some hindering corpse piles. We have an obscuring hedge. An obstructing hedge, and then we have dense forest, which is obstructing and hindering. So we have a big obstructing, hindering terrain feature here, an obstructing but not hindering terrain feature here, some hindering terrain features here, the reminder that hindering is no impact attacks through, and then 2 obscuring terrain features here and here. We also have some impassable palisades. One is down here, and the other is a little off screen right now, about there. Just to kind of muck up flank movement a little bit, make things a bit more challenging. They might be on the very edge of the table, but they can genuinely make it difficult for people to maneuver just a little bit in some interesting ways. In terms of lists, you will see them walk onto the battlefield as the game progresses, but I am running a city-states list that is built very much around stuff that is available now, but a really solid like infantry and Minotaur core. I've got a very lightly loaded out Polemarch as my Warlord with his Army of Lions supremacy ability, and he has just Atalanta Spear and nothing else. You can make him very expensive, but he is very cheap, and he is in an entire unit of 8 Phalangites. So those are the proper pole pike regiments. Support 3, and you'll see how important they are as the game progresses. Otherwise, in his group, we have a unit of Minotaur Haspists. Those are the ones that Vanguard onto the battlefield, and 2 units of Minotaur Thyreans. Those are the really punchy ones. We then have a completely naked Aristarch leading a slightly more technical battle group, 2 each of the Agema and Hoplite regiments. Agema are kind of like good elite medium infantry that I really like actually, and Hoplites are kind of okay light infantry. Both of those have fluid formation. The Aristarch will go in the Hoplites to give a medium stand to the regiment that can score, and they also have a Minotaur in them, an auxiliary, and then we have 2 units of Hoplites, good solid Hoplites, in what I think is kind of like a very well-rounded setup, which is all the regiments that can have the attachment the Dorilates that gives them flurry. So 2 units of Hoplites with the Dorilates, which gives them flurry, and a Minotaur and 1 extra stand. So that takes them to 5, which will keep them at slightly better resolve. They've got good defense but poor resolve, and that should sort of like help keep them in place, give them a bit of punch, just generally like a well-rounded unit for the cost. The Spires army is a menagerie, an unnumbered menagerie army, and it's built around 2 really big units of Onslaught Drones with juiced up Pheromancers in them, and then supporting that is the unnumbered menagerie. We've got tons of Stryx units, tons of Force-Grown Drone units, and then a high clone Executor bringing along his unit of Vanguard clone Infiltrators. They're actually not going to be stellar performers this game, partly because of the terrain, but partly because they are not supported nearly as well by Pheromancers as they are by, and this is a Pheromancer-based list, they aren't supported nearly as well by Pheromancers as they are by Biomancers. Biomancers make Vanguard clone Infiltrators go off. Pheromancers are a little trickier to use, and their tools generally will make them work a little bit better with something like Marksman clones. The unit he wanted to test most as well is Pteraphons. In his opinion, they're not fantastic, and I think I have to agree. Pteraphons are not terrific, but he wanted to try them out. And so the unit of them is in the list as well, in, I believe, the High Clone Executors battle group. Had they been kind of anything else, he'd probably have had a better list. They're a bit kind of multi-role in a way that really leaves them a bit strained, but they were interesting at least, and they did some things that were cool. So, this is the terrain. This scenario, I believe it's called melee, but we have 2 big zones and then 2 small zones. Most of the scoring is for these zones. If you control the big ones, those are 3 points per turn. If you control the small ones, those are 2 points per turn. And if you control at least 2 zones, that's another +2. In addition, you get 2 points for killing characters, 2 points for killing units, and 2 points for killing the Warlord. There are actually not a lot of scenarios in Conquest that will let you kill point units to gain points. This is one of them. And it's one of the things that actually helped keep me in the game, this game, because there's a lot of ground to cover. And although with all of those light regiments, Dan's list wasn't great at holding ground, it was very dangerous and it pins me back quite a lot. So the fact that I could fight into those units of Stryx, etc., and I had a smaller footprint, I had just 2 full warbands in my army, whereas he had a whole bunch of stuff going on, kind of helped. And it's interesting that that is in some scenarios. If Parabellum are in a situation where they feel like multiple small units are becoming spammy and being a balance problem, and I don't think they are right now, they're quite, actually, of all rank and flanks that I play, all 2 of them, I think they are definitely, unit spam is very balanced in Conquest because of the whole supremacy system and how the game works. But if they ever wanted to put their fingers on the scales in that respect, adding that to more scenarios would sort of reduce the effect of MSUs. As it is, I think they're very balanced. I think they don't need to, but it's just interesting to see how scenarios can balance a game. Anyway, I have only 1 light unit in my army. Dan has a bunch, so let's jump forward and see what the end of the turn looks like. So here we are at the end of the turn, and I have bought my unit again. Mentioned that they're proxies. I will try and remind you what things are. This is a unit of Dorilates, and they have come on the flank. They are moving on in this direction, specifically because I am vaguely hoping to have this terrain intervening between myself and Vanguard clone infiltrators, although frankly VCI are so fast that it would not save me if I was so inclined. But I would take this as a straightforward fight if I have to. There is an order, basically I can give untouchable to this unit, thanks to the, I'm going to call him a Strategos, but thanks to the Aristarch, I have a chance of surviving VCI shots. But I'm kind of hoping that I don't have that fight. I'm also inclined to bring the Dorilates onto a flank because with fluid formation they can quite easily reform. Over here we have 2 of the units of Stryx that have appeared. Those look like Empire Knights, yet they're Stryx, I promise you. Again, there are some proxies happening here. Dan only owns so much, I only own so much. But the Stryx have moded up the board, they are very fast at speed 10, and then the clones have fallen in behind them. So we have a unit of bound clones here, and then we have the Vanguard clone infiltrators with the high clone Executor. Now, had there been marksman clones rather than Vanguard clones in this list, what would probably have happened is that the high clone would have jumped into, say, this unit, and he would have moved up just on turn 2 for scoring, and then on turn 3 have yeeted back into a marksman clone regiment to actually shoot. So the way things are looking now, this is what will happen from time to time. You're facing against an army with a lot of light regiments. Spires, for example, can really throw light regiments onto the board, and you're playing without that. That is totally fine. I've gotten to see some of the commitment of Dan's forces, and in particular, I know where the Vanguard clones are now. Now, he's not going to be as aggressive with them this game. He wants to try and experiment with keeping them in the fight for longer. But I know where they are now, and I can basically place my forces in a way that will kind of help me absorb some shots from them. They are going to be annoying and powerful this game, but basically the larger terrain. Remember that this is like 11 inches across, which is, I'm trying to write 11 inches in marks there. This is 11 inches across, which is much bigger than you are normally allowed with the Parabellum scenario rules. This is going to help me keep my units alive in the face of this shooting, and this shooting is less powerful than if Biomancers were in the list. So turn 1 ends, turn 2 begins. So here we're at the end of turn 2, and what we can see is some very aggressive maneuvering on the part of the Spires, and slightly more conservative on the part of the city-states. Again, a recognition of the fact that I've only got so many things on the table so far. This unit of Stryx is now 20 inches up the board. They've gone a long way, and they're basically completely safe. They've come into the flank of this regiment. There is no way that I'm going to be able to charge them next turn. My best hope is to try and stop them from charging me. I think it's possible that he could have pulled them around on this angle a little bit more, but had he done so, he might have had to have been in the front arc of this regiment. But what would have been basically ideal is if they'd ended up somewhere like that or like that. Again, challenging with the wheels, because you've got to not be in the front arc of this regiment, but basically lining up for a flank would have been really dangerous. Stryx are not incredible in melee, but flank attacks into phalanx shield units suck. What has happened is that the Pteraphons have shown their quality here, and they are a medium unit that is speed 20, and they've come onto the board straight onto this objective. Fast scoring units are good, and this has allowed them to jump onto this zone immediately, which in combination with the high clone executive here means that Spires have an immediate and early scoring lead. They're going to score this zone here and this zone here. And if you remember in this scenario, that's +3 for the big one, +2 for the small one, and +2 for holding 2 zones. So that immediately puts Dan on 8 points, which is a good start. Now for my part, I have city-state Minotaur Haspists, and they can do the same thing. They're not speed 10, but they are speed 6 with Vanguard, and so my Haspists, again, that's these are Haspists, I promise, have moved 18 inches up the field, which just gets them in range of this, literally to the point, to within the micrometer, as it were, puts them exactly in range of this objective, which will allow me to score that objective. Now that's only going to give me 3 points, but it's not nothing, and that will help. In terms of other stuff that's gone on, I have moved this unit of Hoplites onto the field, so it's a unit of 4 Hoplites with an auxiliary in the regiment, and they have moved forward their maximum distance, but they are basically keeping this forest in between them and the Vanguard clones. The Vanguard clones have actually declined to advance. Dan wants to see how they play in the late game if he can keep them alive. So they're not moving forward very much. They will shoot more next turn, but that is going to basically keep this outsized forest is going to keep these hoplites alive in a way that it basically wouldn't if it was smaller. We've also seen this big Chungus regiment come on, and let's just pause for a moment to look how intimidating this is. This is a juiced out Pheromancer. He personally has Aura of Death 4, and he's given the unit Lethal Demise, and this is a unit of 8, so that's 9 total. There are 9 stands in this regiment of the Pheromancer, Onslaught Drones. That's a lot of Onslaught Drones. That is scary, and I'm facing them down right now. Again, I had no choice here. They were always going to come on after me. I'm facing them down with a unit of Minotaur Haspists. I've been using this, who have shields. I've been using the city-state strategic stack sort of throughout both turns so far, just as a delaying mechanism, just as a put this on the stack, activate nothing, and then get to the end of the turn and activate the stack unit. It's not had a huge effect right now because it's not nearly enough to overcome just how many light regiments the Spires have, how many activations they have over me at the moment. But it's not bad. It's kind of interesting. It's a cool mechanic, and the ability to on the fly kind of like unstuff your command ordering is pretty useful. In this game, we won't see a situation where I'm able to like delay one regiment to use it later to do something like, for example, get a duel I might otherwise not, or unbreak something I might otherwise not. It never particularly came up. I was programming either mostly okay or terribly, but it is a really interesting mechanic. So this is how we look at the end. This is a heavily developed board already at the end of turn 2. I've got one decent infantry unit here, one decent infantry unit here, and the Minotaur Haspists. That's turn 2. Let's jump to turn 3. So here's turn 3, and we've got some damage, but no combat yet. I am avoiding combat, and at the moment, so is Dan. But decisive action is coming. More Stryx have turned up. We now have a unit of Stryx over here and a unit of Stryx over here. And I've tried to counter them at least a little. They're leering into the flank of this unit of Hoplites. And I've tried to counter them with a unit of Minotaur Thyreans. So these are Thyreans. I can't write with this pen. But they are coming in basically to try and deal with this situation. This is going to be messy because Stryx have lethal demise, and Hoplites in the flank, and even just Thyreans generally. Thyreans generally charging into a lethal demise unit is not going to be a great time. I will probably kill the Stryx, but I'm going to lose a lot of units taking this fight, and we'll see that next turn. But it's what I've got. It's the best that I've going to happen. Stryx, by the way, are irregular, which means I don't set reinforcement lines, so I'm able to bring on another Hoplite unit here, facing down on towards this zone. This is going to be pretty decisive over the course of the game because although these guys, so Hoplites are tough, right? Hoplites are a good durable unit for the cost, but there is way too much force coming in on them, and in particular, this situation here. This is going to be messy no matter what happens. I'm almost certainly going to get flank charged. They're in for a bad time, but hugging the table side here. I've gone with kind of like a Horns of the Bull situation, you'll see soon. Hugging this table side, particularly coming on after the Stryx are committed here, projecting force in this direction. I get shot a bit by the Pteraphons, but Pteraphons, again, they're a multi-role unit that pays a bunch of points for being fast and okay in melee and okay at shooting. They're not good at any of them in particular. So yeah, there are some shots here. They're outside of effective range. I take like a couple of wounds of damage. Over here, I also get quite lucky. He has to reform the Vanguard clones and then move forward to get a shot because he's a bit log jammed. So the Vanguard clones shoot into this regiment, but I am defense 4 from the front. And because this is a really wide, obscuring, light, loose forest, I'm able to keep the worst of the shots from connecting. Also, he doesn't have Biomancer buffs, so like no deadly shot. So this is just unjuiced clone executors, plus Vanguard clone infiltrators. So firing into this unit, they do something like 2 wounds, which is very tolerable. I will take that till the cows come home. Again, if you can just keep terrain and good defenses in between you and Vanguard clones, you will survive. However, briefly, it's just when you start bringing, like when you don't have illegally large terrain pieces, or for example, when there aren't Biomancers buffing them. That's when it starts to, at this point, they're holdable. These guys are continuing to move in this direction, but they really haven't moved at all because I don't want to move them into a position where this charge is easy or this charge becomes legal. The Minotaurs are blocking right now. I want to set up a hammer and anvil situation here, and unfortunately it's the poor Minotaurs that are going to be the anvil. They've just moved forward. The Vanguard, the Onslaught Drones have moved forward and into the breach, boys. I've also made, and you can see these guys here now, I've made what would be probably the most important decision of the game. This is my 9 strong with the Polemarch block of Phalangites. I had to decide where to commit them. On paper, they're not bad at facing down the Vanguard clones because they have the battlefield orders of the Polemarch, which will let them force the enemy to reroll ones to hit against them, which does really cut, because of rapid shot on the Vanguard clones, does cut the amount of damage that they do. But I kind of made the decision that there was too much force in this space here, particularly with these Onslaught drones having appeared, for me to, like, if I turned up here, I was going to be fighting on Dan's turns. There'd be shots coming in, I'd get pinned back, I would absolutely lose this flank, and he would crush around. I made the call that I had to win here. I had to win here, and I had to win here, I had to seed the center. And so they came on here because this unit had the best chance by far of winning the fight against these Onslaught drones. Phalanx is not ignored by Linebreaker, and I can actually concentrate enough force against these guys. This unit has to fight wide, I can fight narrow, and we'll see how that went. Let's jump forward. Okay, so messes have been made. What's going on? Well, unconsequentially, the Agima have moved forward. But remember this unit here? Remember this big, bold, proud unit of Hoplites? Yeah, they've been absolutely trashed. I managed to wipe out... So this one Minotaur Thyrean, this wounded, broken Minotaur Thyrean, what happened to him? He fought Stryx. They didn't hit him, he charged them, and lethal demise is a hell of a drug. I knew this was going to happen, but I had to stop it. It is what it is. He crashed in, wiped out one unit of Stryx, and the other unit of Stryx made their flank charge. And as kind of expected, that flank charge, plus a front charge, plus a few pokes backwards from the Hoplites, taking lethal demise hits. I've honestly gotten quite lucky. This was a full Stryx unit. I'd have knocked out 2 stands, but for my trouble, I've gone from a 270-something point 5-strong unit to just 1 dude. That's the command stand there. They have unbroken themselves, but this fight, kind of as expected, has gotten violent. I've brought the Agima, who are kind of excellent medium infantry, on, just with the hope of, like, we're just going to fight here as long as we can. We're going to throw some resources in, we're going to do some damage. All I'm hoping is to basically make everything here die. I don't care if everything here dies, as long as these units can't overrun and pivot back onto the flanks. The role of the center right now is as a pinning element. Over here, a bunch of shots have come into the Dorilates, but I have my defenses online in time. So what does that mean? Well, we've got Army of Lions from the Polemarch, who is giving them Tenacious, and I have Untouchable from the Aristarch's Battlefield Orders, and then also these guys have got shields and 2 armor, and to be blunt, I rolled really well. We took a full Vanguard clone Infiltrator volley to the dome. It wasn't an aimed volley, they had to move, but they still hit so many times. But I rolled just some incredible defenses, mediocre rolls, no Biomancer buffs, so again, I think I took 2 wounds here, which I will take all the way to the bank. It's going to get much worse for these guys pretty soon, but that's tolerable. Over here, the Minotaur Haspists have made a charge, did some damage, all of it regenerated back. Lethal Demises bodied them, and we have 1 broken Haspist alive with 1 wound. So the little champion held, but my opponent would be scoring this right now if not for the fact that I used the battlefield orders of the Polemarch to make this unit always contest regardless of enemy number of stands. So this objective right now is off the table for now. Over here, we just did a march charge into the Pteraphons. I probably should have left that for later in the turn because they are less dangerous shooting than melee attacking, but they went in just to get onto the objective, and they got basically clashed back and took a bunch of wounds. It was tolerable. It's a front attack. There is cleave on the Pteraphons, but I'll take that rather than... I got onto the objective, basically. There was a flank charge here with these bound clones, but it was a flank charge to reorient, so they reformed and then they charged. And likewise over here, these guys really wanted to charge into this regiment. Fluid formation makes it super easy if they weren't already in range, and I could have put like pretty much the full 5, like reformed, big long line here, and smashed through this regiment. Like I got in a lot of damage, I expect, because I did like 2 stands worth of damage. When have we got there right now? We've got 7 stands there right now, yeah. So the 4 of these were regenerated back. I think actually 8 wounds were restored after the attack by the Thyreans when I won, not Thyreans, Haspists. I could have possibly broken this regiment, except that a little unit of bound clones went move, charge, and tied me up. So I've killed them. I've stabbed them back for their temerity, but 90 points has held me in place for just long enough to enable basically this breakthrough to happen. But overall, at the time, this felt pretty dire. But I think, realistically, this is not the worst position. I'm doing okay here. I can just get the charge next turn, I'll be alright. I'm doing okay here. This is nominally a fight that I probably win, although it's going to suck. And I can maybe break through here and Minotaurs are on the way. All of these fights, like the nascent plan in my mind, which was we win on this flank and we win on this flank and we just make a mess of the center, is working. That said, the scenario points are not looking good. I think the way that this one lines up, no one scores it, but Dan's got this one, and Dan's got... no one's got this one, no one's got this one. So Dan, I think the way this worked is I had like 2 on the objective, and he maybe had more, I'm not sure. But Dan's points have ticked up a little bit more than mine again, and violence has ensued. Push on to the next turn. So jumping forward again and things are getting spicy. I won the roll here and that was really significant. I still have fewer, even though like Stryx units are dying like flies, I still have fewer units. Won the roll, actually rolled a 1, turned it into a 0. And the plan was the first thing was going to be the Heliarch and I would basically turn the tide on whatever needed to be turned. And so these guys, the fluid formation, it's late, not Hoplites, Dorilates. They fluid formation to get like past this unit and then around and in. So they haven't killed the unit of Vanguard clone Infiltrators, but they've really smashed it up. And what we're actually seeing here is some of the problems with a unit this large. I actually do think that massively large Onslaught drone regiments have some merit, but they need so much space to breathe. You need, rather than having units in front of them, you need marksman clone units or something behind them. Because just physically moving a regiment like this is very, very difficult. And we can see right now, as long as these Vanguard clones are alive, there's no legal charge on the Dorilates. It's not like physically possible to get in and align. This unit is stuck here, being very expensive and hugely dangerous, but they are stuck here. On this flank, I've come in, there's been, one of the Stryx units has been destroyed, the other one has been beaten up, but it has cost me my Hoplites, as expected. This Minotaur has rallied. These Minotaurs made a big old charge and destroyed the drones here, and I'm slowly winning this fight here against the Pteraphons. This has worked out basically ideally. The Thyreans don't want to be fighting Stryx, they just blow up. I want to be killing through things that my cleave actually matters against, even if it matters just a little bit. So we've broken the drones. I basically had a plan for this turn and it went quite well off the back of turn the tide here, and then all of the rest of the early activations were on this side. So we got the damage that we needed here, and then we got, like, we just copped it from there on out. And we pushed hard on this flank. And because we pushed hard on this flank early, it's damaged, it's damaged and killed things. Like in particular, it's damaged and killed, it completely wiped those force-grown drones before they could make a clash into the flank of these hoplites. And flank attacks on hoplites are just catastrophic. Even from force-grown drones, he would have killed more than I wanted. So this I feel like was a really worthwhile play. Over here, not a lot of damage yet, but one thing that I did do, so the Minotaurs held annoyingly long, and what actually happened was that Dan, so I couldn't really activate them. If I'd activated them and took a swing, they'd have died to the lethal demise, because he had 1 wound left. I wanted to have Dan at some point clash and destroy the Minotaur and then charge in, and then let me have full bottle swing with this big unit of pikes. But he didn't let that happen. So the Minotaurs kind of had to just faff around, and Dan used his activation advantage over to me to force me out of being able to hit him. What I did do though, since I had an activation with these guys, is I reformed them into a 2-wide, 5-deep block. And the reason why I've done this is that you have infinite concentration of force with these guys, because they all just have support 3, but the Onslaught Drones can't do the same. So the Onslaught Drones eventually they went very last in the entire turn. They wiped out the Thyrean and they've charged, which is going to set up a very dangerous attack next turn, which we'll see in a moment. But it's not going to be nearly as dangerous as it was if I had to fight wide. If I had to fight wide like this, the next turn this unit would annihilate me. But because I can fight deep, he's got 4 stands in contact. This stand and this stand here cannot do any more than contribute support attacks, which reduces the number of attacks into me by like 8 dice. Like 8 fewer dice are going to be coming into this regiment, which is actually going to be 16 fewer dice because of what a Pheromancer can do. So overall, although I haven't gotten to clash this turn, this formation change, super significant. Let's move ahead. So as we can see, we're getting to the pointy end. A lot of stuff has exploded. A lot actually went on this turn, and I'm going to try and break down what has happened because it was really significant. So on this flank, I had to just weather the Onslaught Drone attack. I kind of committed to the fact Dan would actually have fewer, it was either fewer or it was the same number of cards in the deck, which meant that no one had an advantage on the roll. And as it happened, he won. And so I had to make plans basically for, I planned on having some flexibility in the stack, but basically stopping the worst from occurring and executing on my plan. So flank by flank, we've wiped out the Pteraphons here. That's totally cool. There was actually we've killed the Pteraphons with the Hoplites, which has freed up some things to happen, which we'll get to in a moment. The most important activation was like my first thing was the Agema down here. Now they're dead now, but what they did was they took an uninspired clash against the Stryx, killed the last Stryx stand, and then charged into the flank of this big unit of drones. So they occupied basically this space here that now has Minotaurs in it. This meant that this huge unit of Onslaught Drones was not going to be able to do anything more than like kill them this turn. I effectively used an elite medium infantry unit as a pinning regiment, but I used it as a pinning regiment. That meant that when the Vanguard clone Infiltrators activated, like they planned to retreat, and they actually did. They retreated. They didn't even. Dan realized what had happened because I did this very early in the turn. So he just had a Pheromancer turn them into bombs, basically make them clash, do some more damage, clash again, do some more damage, and then explode themselves. So they finally died. But by the time they did that and opened the path that the Onslaught Drones wanted to take into this regiment, instead they'd gotten engaged in the flank. So when these Onslaught Drones activated, sure, they annihilated the Agema, but they had to inspire Clash to do it, and that left them stranded in this position. That let me bring Minotaur and Hoplites into the regiment, hitting them from all sides. And although I've only done, I've done some damage here, because these are all just like reform charge, move charge, fluid formation charge, clash. It's only so many hits. It's some hits, and it's pinning this big regiment in place. I actually have aspirations of killing them at this point, but we're going to see what they can do pretty shortly. But this is feeling basically okay at this stage, and at minimum they're pinned in place. They are trying to hold two objectives at once, but they're not doing so right now. Over here, we saw the quality of this formation. So this huge, wide Onslaught Drone unit, regenerated all the way up to full. It's like healing 6 points a turn or something. I think this regiment's healing 6 points a turn. It has the Warlord in it. This regiment healed 4, maybe healed 8, went up to full anyway. And it took the fight against these guys. Now, because they are in such a narrow frontage, what the Pheromancer does is the Pheromancer inspires them and then makes them clash twice. So a ton of attacks came into this regiment, but we held. I'm defense 3, he doesn't ignore that. My resolve is quite good, he doesn't ignore that. I have tenacious, he doesn't ignore that. So this Onslaught Drone unit, which is very, very dangerous, basically hammered into these guys an absolute ton, but only killed some regiments. And then they G'd up and they swung. And this regiment slaps. There were, I think I lost 2 stands to the Onslaught Drones plus some wounds, which meant I had 6 stands of Phalangites remaining, which is doing 18, 19 dice, hitting on 3s with rerolls, plus the Polemarch himself. That is a ton of damage output because so many of those attacks hit. I might have even only lost 1 stand. I might have had like this many at this time. I might have had more than I did, but like it was just a ton of dice, and they just hammered through. Because right, so the Pheromancer, to get those 2 clashes, had to put Decay 3 on the regiment, and Decay 3 tore through the regiment, right? So he lost like 2 stands to Decay 3, maybe more, 2.5 stands. And then I hit him, and then he lost more, and he broke, and he shattered. So the force, and then I took a whole bunch of damage from lethal demise, but I'm alive. This regiment is battered. They are broken, but they have broken the hold of the Spires on this flank. They have killed a character. They are scoring here, and I am scoring here. So at this point, Dan has a massive scenario lead, but we have enough time. Things are ticking down. All I need to do is hold this regiment in place. So that's the plan. So we're getting to the close here. This is sort of effectively the final turn. I had hopes of winning the supremacy roll and doing a whole bunch more damage to this regiment, but what has actually happened is that Dan has won the roll, the Pheromancer has gone first, and because it's very, very easy to program Pheromancy when you have 2 cards in your deck. Because the Pheromancy draws the next card, which is the bottom card of the deck, does a thing to it, and puts it on the bottom of the deck. So what he's done is he has made this unit inspire, and he has healed the unit for like 6, because they regenerate, and then he regenerates them a bit more. And then he has inspired the regiment, and then he has clashed. And so he has wiped out the little 1-man Thyrean regiment. He has done a bunch of damage to the other one, and he has annihilated the Dorilates. Because in this case, he's able to actually concentrate his force. If we think about like how everything was lined up, right? There were very few Onslaught drones not attacking. Unlike in this fight, where I could basically like hot gates him and like hold him in place. This is where we fight, this is where they die kind of situation. Here, I was engaging these onslaughts from all sides, which means that he could attack me back from all sides. And when they actually get to swing twice, they will kill a lot of points. So I lose a Dorilates unit, I lose a Dorilates unit here with the Aristarch in it. I lose a Thyrean here and another Thyrean here, but I hold them in place. This unit is not broken. This stand is contested, this stand is not scored, and this turn, apart from just all of the stuff that I've killed, I am scoring. I'm scoring here and I'm scoring here. And so basically all we have to do now is there are only so many turns left in the game. I actually pull these guys back. I make a call, do I want to go in here or not? And I decide not to. I pull these guys back. And the reason why is that this unit is regenerating up 6 a turn. Dan is going to probably win the roll next turn. He is probably going to kill these guys because he can heal back like that. Right? So heal 2 here, and then heal 4 here. So those Thyreans are going to go down, and he will eventually probably build dominance. He'll grow, secure and build some dominance here. But these objectives are only worth 2 points each. These are worth 3 points each, and he's going to be falling back behind. Basically, there are enough turns in the game that his only course of victory realistically would be to kill them quickly, run over here quickly, maybe fight and win against this unit, but he's not going to regenerate fast enough to do that. And there are only so many turns in the game, and if I fight him while he's in his weakened state, I am going to kill this regiment. If I kill this regiment, I will absolutely win. So it's sort of, we reach the détente period, these guys pull back, these guys are going to pull back. They will die, but they will die and hold in place, and that is, for practical purposes, the conclusion of the game. We score out all the way to turn 10, and city-states get over the line with something like an 8-point margin, but that is literally just one turn of scoring. They get over the line with one turn of scoring, game recovered by exactly that point. So overall, sort of, this was my first game of city-states. I don't think I'm going to play them particularly much, but they were an interesting change of pace. But they're only kind of a change of pace, and by that, what I mean is, I would not pick up city-states if you were already an Old Dominion player and wanted something different to do, because they play kind of similarly. City-states are built around like big, resilient, solid infantry units, kind of elite infantry units, and Old Dominion are built very, very similarly. Both of them supplement their forces with some really cool brute regiments. They play in different ways. You get to play with the strategic stack in city-states. You get to play with your like your magic and like the Fallen Divinity in Old Dominion. So there are definite textural and flavoral differences, but they really do feel like sort of matched adversaries. Both of them are different kinds of heirs to the legacy of the Dominion of the Pantocrator, which is cool. It's cool that they have those thematic consistencies because they come from the same place. But I wouldn't pick up one if you already had the other. In terms of the experiments with Spire, something I keep running into actually is it is interesting just how much of a release valve your opponent's burnout can be, because you have these moments, you have these clashes constantly where Spires will like woo up a unit with all of this juice and take a huge swing and deal tons of damage, but then melt like 2 stands in their own regiment. And you really, really have to, like, doing damage to yourself is something you must be incredibly judicious with. Dan is getting a pretty good eye for it in terms of figuring out when and how he should actually make his unit explode. But I've had games where it's like, I remember we did a game where I played as Spires, and I had a Biomancer army with like tons of emanations, and everything was going incredibly. And then I used the Biomancer's Supremacy ability, and at the end of the turn, things were no longer going incredibly, because all of that burnout is super bad for you, and damage to your own units sucks. So the Pheromancer's very, very like technically interesting. They do really textured things that like just you can program your army in interesting and complicated ways. But part of why I think, like, if in doubt, if I wanted to play Spires and I didn't want to go like all in on them, I wanted to learn to play them a little more simply. I think the fact that Biomancers are easier to use, like the tension between those two is really interesting. Pheromancers absolutely have this impressive high watermark, but the fact that Biomancers are just easier to use, the fact that they have an easier time healing back the damage they cause. Part of why Vanguard clones are so dangerous with them is that the Biomancer can juice the Vanguard clones, have them activate, and then often heal most of the damage that they've done to the Vanguard clones, turning them up to 11. Pheromancers can't do the same thing. You feasibly could if you had 2 units, like you need 2 units of Vanguard clones, like all of the Pheromancy stuff relies on multiple of the same type units, like there's a lot of complexity. You got to build the list a certain way. So super interesting, very, very interesting game, very close game. I had a battle plan that I formulated on the fly, and it basically played out, right? Horns of the Bull held both of these flanks, the important flanks, let the center not collapse, but hold just long enough. And I feel like it was an interesting experience. I've never had a game of Conquest that was totally one-sided. The way the game plays just always feels like you have ups and downs and highs and lows. You definitely you play 2,000 points of Conquest, you are signing up for an experience, a series of experiences, and this definitely was one. So super interesting to play the city-states. Once again, interesting to play into Spires. I'm not sure when the next battle report for Conquest will be, but when it does come out, I will try and make it with some different factions. It'll probably be Old Dominion, but let's see if we can't organize a game and do something like Nords or Dweghom. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time.